Hey everyone, it's Josh Nelson from Sox Machine. Welcome to the emergency studio as far as in my kitchen. I appreciate you guys hopping in as it's currently around 12:30 p.m. Central Time as the Chicago White Sox just received some news, or they at least released some news. And again, it's injury news and why we are having this live stream. Tim Anderson, the Chicago White Sox starting shortstop, will be out the next 2 to 4 weeks with a left knee sprain. From one of my sources, I've been told it's an MCL sprain for Tim Anderson. And it's more of a sigh of relief from a Chicago White Sox perspective rather than great concern. And they feel a little bit more optimistic with the original injury diagnosis. The concern was during yesterday's game, even though Tim Anderson tried to play through it, the Minnesota Twins base runner, when diving towards third base, made contact of the side of the knee for Tim Anderson. And that type of contact is always a concern, no matter what sport you're playing. Think about football when a player lands on the side of the knee, that type of weight and impact to the knee oftentimes causes significant knee injuries like a torn ACL or even MCL as well. And for Tim Anderson to try to play through it, or even like recreational sports, those that go skiing, sometimes you slip and fall and you try to continue to ski the rest of the day. And then you start walking and it's like, hey, I can walk at least. And then you come to realize that you go to the doctor because the knee swells and boom, you got a torn ACL. That's not the case here. It is a sprain for Tim Anderson, but he is going to be out 2 to 4 weeks, which means that there's a good chance that he's out for the rest of April. And White Sox fans, I think, fully understand not only just the impact of missing Tim Anderson, but what's ahead for the Chicago White Sox in the next couple of weeks when it comes to their schedule. Not only do they have the Minnesota Twins right now, as they have 2 more games left to go in this series, but they have the home series against the Baltimore Orioles. That is a tough team. Then they have the Philadelphia Phillies, the defending nationally pennant winners. They'll be coming to Chicago. That's not going to be an easy series. And then they go to Tampa Bay, which everyone is watching how Tampa Bay is starting this season, with them now being 10-0. And then the White Sox go to Philadelphia, and then they go to Toronto. And after the Toronto series, which the Blue Jays are tough, then they come back home and they got like a 4-game home series against the Tampa Bay Rays. And there's a chance that the White Sox will not have Tim Anderson for those 7 games against the Rays. So we knew before the season this was going to be a challenging month for the Chicago White Sox, even if everybody was healthy. But now with Tim Anderson getting hurt with the failed rundown, and you added with the Eloy Jimenez also being hurt as he got hurt running from first to third with the hamstring strain. And now Joe Kelly is also in the injured list because he pulled up lame with his hamstring injury running from the bullpen during the brouhaha in Pittsburgh on Sunday with that collision, the O'Neill Cruz and Giuseppe Zavala collision that's knocked out O'Neill Cruz 10 to 12 weeks, which is a significant amount of time with a fractured left ankle. It's just like compounding here. We're only game 12 of the 2023 season for the Chicago White Sox. It'll be later tonight, starting at 6:40 at Target Field. And they don't have Tim Anderson. They don't have Eloy Jimenez. And the other concern now is Yohan Moncada's back. And listening to Bernstein and Holmes today with Lawrence Holmes and Leila Rahimi, Pedro Grifol, there's a recording from last night's game that Yohan Moncada was not even in the dugout yesterday, that he was receiving treatment for his back. Pedro Grifol is optimistic that Yohan Moncada does not need to go on the injured list. Does that mean Yohan Moncada is available tonight? We don't know. So all of a sudden, the core 4, the White Sox have rebuilt their franchise around the position player front. Tim Anderson, Yohan Moncada, Luis Robert, and Eloy Jimenez. There's a chance that 3 of them are going to be out tonight. With Yohan Moncada maybe not going on the injured list, but maybe not ready to go to be in the lineup. So we're we're still waiting as far as confirmation on that when it comes to the White Sox lineup tonight and where Yohan Moncada is going to be. Replacing Tim Anderson is going to be Lenyn Sosa. And if you haven't noticed, Lenyn Sosa has been red hot at Charlotte to start the season. And his whole journey before the White Sox signed Elvis Andrus, we thought that it was going to be a position battle between Romy Gonzalez and Lenyn Sosa. Well, the White Sox, I don't want to say cut Lenyn Sosa, but they demoted him to the minor league camp pretty quickly in spring training. So we never got a chance to see a position battle between Lenyn Sosa and Romy Gonzalez. And as we all know, Romy Gonzalez has made the bench, and he filled that in second base yesterday when Anderson got pulled out of the game. Sosa is hitting well over 400, and he's got more walks than strikeouts. I mean, he has been a man on fire for the Charlotte Knights to start the 2023 season. The question that I have leading to today's game is, how is Pedro Grifol going to play this? You can move Elvis Andrus to his natural position at shortstop. And if Andrus is over at shortstop, maybe he's better defensively than second base, where he's had some hiccups. I'm wondering if that's him still trying to learn the ropes of playing second base after playing most of his career at shortstop. So moving Andrus over to shortstop, does that make him better defensively? What do you do at second base for the White Sox? Is it a given that Lenyn Sosa is going to start every game at second base? Or is Lenyn Sosa going to be on the bench and Romy Gonzalez is going to be the starting second baseman? I don't know if it would be worthwhile to call up Lenyn Sosa, especially with how well he's playing, if he's just going to be a bench guy. If this was Tony La Russa, I would say, yeah, he's going to be a bench guy. But I would rather see Lenyn Sosa start at second base and see if he can carry his hot bat from Charlotte up to Minneapolis today and have him in the lineup and start these games at second base while Tim Anderson is out. Obviously, Romy Gonzalez is going to get some starts here and there. But that's just how I feel, is that Lenyn Sosa should be the starting second baseman if the game plan is to make Elvis Andrus the starting shortstop with Anderson out. Gonzalez can stay as the super utility guy, and Hanser Alberto can help fill in at second base and third base occasionally for those games. So this is going to be something interesting in how the White Sox play this, specifically Pedro Grifol. So this is his first time managing. He's a rookie manager. We're still learning the way that he may leak some things into the media and how he announces injuries and just the significance of those injuries. And we're going to see on how he divs up playing time with Tim Anderson now out the next 2 to 4 weeks. We got some comments here. So TJ helping me out here as I'm live streaming. Moncada likely to miss the rest of the Twin series with back issues. That is a huge bummer if that is the case, because the next two starters for the Minnesota Twins, you got Pablo Lopez today, which they acquired from the Miami Marlins, and that Luis Arraez trade. In 2 starts, Lopez has only allowed 1 earned run. Sonny Gray starts on Wednesday. In 2 starts, Sonny Gray has only allowed 1 earned run. You really need the left-handed bats, and the left-handed bats really helped set the table yesterday. Yeah, Hanser Alberto got the big home run to give the White Sox a 4-1 lead, but to get on base, you had Andrew Benintendi, got Gavin Sheets, Yasmani Grandal picked up an RBI single. The left-handed bats are going to be super critical for the White Sox in the next 2 games against the Baltimore Orioles pitching. You would really like to have Yohan Moncada to be part of that lineup to get as many left-handed bats as possible. Just going to scroll through the comments, and instead of doing Twitter Space, which Twitter Space has been problematic lately, we decided to do the live stream here. So I really appreciate you guys hopping on here. So we got this comment from Wayne. Andrew Benintendi leading off. More disappointed in the Yohan sitting the series. Hell, IL him as well and call up an outfielder. I know that takes a 40-man move. I don't mind Andrew Benintendi leading off, and the reason why I don't mind that is that he is an on-base type of guy. We are not seeing a ton of power from Andrew Benintendi. One of his goals coming into the season was trying to pull the ball in the air. Not seeing a whole lot of that. So while he tries to get used to the season here and gets back into rhythm, I don't mind if his idea is, I'm just going to get on base no matter what. And the White Sox could use that type of guy leading off. So if we see Andrew Benintendi being more conscious and going back to his line driveways where we see more singles from Benintendi, maybe some more walks, that could help out the White Sox at the top of the order. But yeah, again, I'm learning while you guys are sending comments to me about Makata. Not having Makata for the rest of the series is going to be problematic. We got this comment on Twitch from Bennett Carroll. Will the White Sox ever be healthy? No or no. These players do not like staying healthy. And breaking it down, the Eloy Jimenez and Joe Kelly injuries just befuddle me. Like, all you could do is just laugh. Like, you guys can't run. You can't run without getting hurt. Like, that's kind of sad. Like, you're professional athletes. You should be able to run first to third without a concern of getting a hamstring strain. You should be able to sprint from the bullpen without pulling a hamstring. And Joe Kelly has not provided a lot of big moments for the White Sox since they signed him and spent all this big money. He has not lived up to the occasion. So, I mean, that's problematic. We're quickly entering the Kelvin Herrera territory when it comes to the Joe Kelly signing. So the Kelly and Jimenez injuries, I just shake my head. And yeah, that's very White Sox. Tim Anderson, I guess you could say it's very White Sox. He got hurt and he failed rundown, because it just seems this organization, no matter who is managing, can't execute a rundown properly. But this is just I guess you could call it baseball play, very similar to how O'Neal Cruz hurt himself sliding to Seby Zavala. This time, Tim Anderson being in the base path, being a little bit out of position in the rundown, was at the wrong place at the wrong time, getting slid into, and now he's out for 2 to 4 weeks. So I consider Anderson's injury more bad luck. The other two, stretch. Come on, do something. So TJ had this comment: take it a step back. The Zips projections of 77 wins feels quite founded. The depth was a concern all offseason, and now we're already getting into that 26-30 numbered players of the depth chart. And TJ, you make a really good point here. And even speaking to Dan Zaborski, the holder of Zips for Fangraphs, this is the point that he was making with the Chicago White Sox. This team doesn't have a lot of depth. And sorry, but the computer program Zips does not like the major league capabilities of the White Sox bench pieces, especially if they have to play a significant amount of time. This is going to be the difference between 2001 and 2022. Everybody uses excuses for the 2022 season for the White Sox. The 2021 White Sox also had a lot of injuries. These 4 players, Eloy Jimenez, Tim Anderson, Yohan Mercado, Luis Robert, in 2021, did not play in a game together until August of that season. Yermin Mercedes had a big April. Then Jake Lamb got hot for a couple of weeks. And then Billy Hamilton got hot for a couple of weeks. And Brian Goodwin got hot a couple of weeks. It just seems like whoever the White Sox had on the bench played really well, especially early season, April to June. And that's why the White Sox were able to overcome those injuries and be able to win the American League Central. The bench last year did not play very well for the Chicago White Sox, hence why they were 81 and 81. This is going to be if we're trying to be more optimistic about 2023 and leave 2022 behind, it's really going to have to come down to how Lenin Sosa and Romy Gonzalez play early here, how Jake Berger and Gavin Sheets continue to hit with Eloy Jimenez out, and let's see what Kenyon Middleton or anyone else the White Sox call up for the bullpen tries to replace Joe Kelly. Ronaldo Lopez did his best Liam Hendricks impression yesterday, getting the 4-out save, which is key. Somebody had to step in to fill in for Liam Hendricks. But yeah, to TJ's point, if the White Sox want to shed 2022, if they want to have a better record and they don't want to dig themselves a hole early, it's really up to these bench guys to step up in a big way. I mean, not even sometimes the bench guys, like Elvis Andrus has to play better. Hopefully Luis Robert continues to play at a high level. And Yasmani Grandal helps continue to drive in runs. And maybe we'll see more power. We're seeing some double power from Andrew Vaughn, but we're not seeing a lot of home run power early from the White Sox first baseman. So I think that's what's going to set the difference between 2023. If 2023 is more like 2021, where the White Sox won the division, or if it's more like 2022. And it's a disappointing season because they don't have the depth to overcome the injuries. Like that's the difference in 21, 22, in my opinion. The position players, the role players, the bench players really picked up their game, especially the first 3 months of that season. We got Tom Skelton. Glass half full, Sosa's looked great at AAA and has a history of adjusting as he rose through the levels. You're absolutely right, Tom, especially last year. He was just a guy in the White Sox farm system, and then he broke out in a big way. And we had a watch party for his first home run in Kansas City. And before Elvis Andrus signing, if the White Sox were going to have an internal battle at second base, I like Lenin Sosa a lot more than Romy Gonzalez. If you ask me who should be the White Sox starting second baseman between Sosa and Gonzalez, it should be Sosa. I have more confidence in Sosa to be able to hold his own offensively in the major leagues than Romy Gonzalez. So I'm with you, Tom. But to your point, Tom, this is really on Pedro Grifol. Is he going to start Sosa every day, or are we going to find out that he's splitting playing time between Sosa and Gonzalez? I just don't think it's beneficial for Sosa to be called up if he's not the starter. And hopefully the White Sox front office has had that conversation with him. We got this question from Alexander. Who plays more, Buxton, Eloy, or Robert Jr.? Oh, man, Alexander. I'm going to go with Robert. I'm being optimistic here. I'm not too optimistic on Eloy playing a full season when he gets back, but I'm going to go with Luis Robert. The Twins, really interesting the way that they're handling Byron Buxton. Didn't start yesterday, so they're giving him games off, even though it's pretty important division games. And he's not playing much center field, so they can try to keep him around. So really interesting strategy of the Twins using Byron Buxton. We got Jerry. The White Sox need power from whoever they put at DH. Ball go far, team go far. You're absolutely right, Jerry, which is why I think Gavin Sheets is doing a good job of getting on base, but we're not seeing a lot of power from Gavin Sheets. Jake Berger has displayed a lot of power. I think we need this time where I don't think it's automatic that Gavin Sheets is the starter against certain right-handed pitchers. I would like Jake Berger to get some starts at DH against right-handed pitchers because we do need to figure out if Jake Berger can hit major league right-handed pitching. And if he can't, he can't. Then we know. And then Jake Berger is just a role player for the rest of his career. But if he can hit right-handed pitching with the same type of authority that he does against left-handed pitching, then Jake Berger can provide the power that Jerry's alluded to that the White Sox really need. Wayne, Romy a good utility player. Sosa gives me hope for starting second base. I agree, Wayne. I think the athleticism for Romy Gonzalez makes him a better super utility player. The bat, I just don't think is major league caliber to be a starting every single day. Julie Kaufman, to the point of Sosa adjusting, what happens if he looks like a keeper? How does the roster shake out at the end of April? This is a phenomenal question, Julie. Lenin Sosa, if he continues to just set the world on fire like he did at Charlotte, I don't know how Elvis Andrus does not feel the heat. And I'm a big supporter of Elvis Andrus. I thought that was a really good signing by the White Sox. I thought Elvis Andrus would continue to play well for the White Sox. He is not having a good start for the first 11 games of the year. The White Sox have already demonstrated this season they're willing to eat money. I mean, they are paying Lurie Garcia more this season than Elvis Andrus. Tim Anderson's running, and Tim Anderson's feeling good, and Tim Anderson's coming back to the White Sox. Lenin Sosa, let's say he's hitting like 280, and he's got a couple home runs. And Elvis Andrus is batting like 170, and he's got no home runs, and he's not walking. That's a lot of pressure on Elvis Andrus because Lenin Sosa can fake it at shortstop. And what I mean by fake it, I am confident that he can start a game or two at shortstop. I don't know if I'm ready to declare him ready to be a starting shortstop in the major leagues. We would need time, but I think that time is when you're not expecting to win a division. That's a lot of pressure to put on Sosa to try to figure out how to play shortstop, but he has up the levels for the White Sox. And maybe the White Sox surprise me and they keep Andrews at second base and they have Lenyn Sosa starting at shortstop for some games in the future just to learn. But suddenly the White Sox do have some interesting depth up the middle, not just Lenyn Sosa, but Jose Rodriguez, which we'll have to keep an eye on how he performs down in Birmingham. But this is an excellent question, Julie, because if the White Sox are going to hold players accountable and if they're going to play the hot hand, I got to imagine that's going to be a lot of pressure on Elvis Andrews. He needs to step up and help the White Sox win now, and that's playing better. But he will need to start hitting better if Lenyn Sosa continues to rake. So that's a great question, Julie. Thank you for that. I'm just going back to some past comments. Michael, will the White Sox ever fix their issue with errors? So in the first 10 games, they only had 4 errors. Yesterday was ugly. 3 errors by the White Sox. And of course, it's Dylan Cease starting. So they added those 3 errors, according to Jim, who did the wake-up call today for Sox Machine, added 20 more pitches for Dylan Cease. That cost him an inning. Like Dylan Cease could have went 6 innings yesterday if he didn't have bad defensive play behind him. With the new coaching staff, they were going to be focused on this. So we'll see on what the White Sox do. What's funny, Michael, you have beat reporters showing photos and videos of the White Sox taking infield before games. Kind of a rare thing in Major League Baseball. So they're working on it. I guess I'm just going to chalk it up to a really bad day yesterday. But, man, it cost 20 pitches for Dylan Cease. You don't want to do that to your ace. You want him to try to go as deep as possible. All right, so we got Drew. Would Grifol move Colas up in the lineup to fill the void with how well he's performed at the plate? This is a good question, Drew. I don't know if he would do it now. A month from now, if Colas is still hitting this well, maybe. Grifol has hinted that he likes guys being comfortable and he likes to have a consistent lineup. It's still very early, and it's still very early for Oscar Colas. And while he's had his highlights, there's definitely some learning curves. He's had opportunities like with bases loaded, nobody out, struck out. Runners in second and third with 1 out. Doesn't drive a run in. Like there are some opportunities for him to learn from and continue to get better. So at this moment, I would say no, Drew. I expect Oscar Colas to bat where he's batting. Now watch, the lineup comes out and he's batting 4th today. I haven't seen the lineup yet for today's game. But a month from now, let's see how Grifol hands it. All right. Let's see here. So we got William Berger at third base while Yohan Moncada is out. I don't know if the White Sox have just lost all confidence in Jake Berger to field third base. It feels, William, that Jake Berger is now more first base than third base for the White Sox, which makes him this DH third string first baseman for the White Sox, where at first base it goes Andrew Vaughn, Gavin Sheets, and Jake Berger at the position. That if Yohan Moncada is missing the rest of the series, I am expecting Hanser Alberto to be the starting third baseman. Maybe Romy Gonzalez gets a start at third base. But if Moncada's not available, I think the White Sox are going to go with Hanser Alberto because they have more confidence defensively at Berger than Berger at third base. Maybe Berger gets a start here and there at third base, but we saw so much Jake Berger at first base. It just makes me wonder if the White Sox have moved on from Jake Berger, third baseman, and now just make him a first base. Let's see here. Alexander hopping on. If Sosa stays hot, he may force the White Sox to DFA Andrews or Alberto when TA comes back. I think the White Sox are to hold on Hans or Alberto. I think Andrews is more of a concern as far as possibly losing his role with the White Sox. Bruin, Luke, Berger back to second base? No. I mentioned that once as I was very intoxicated at a White Sox game yesterday. Not happy with myself when I sobered up. No, Jake Berger, second base, not a good idea. Billy Ice, Sosa, 23 years old. Let's get the ball rolling. It's time. Andrews looking, jeez, I'm ready for him to get his everyday shot. Andrews, again, I am expecting to be the everyday shortstop with Tim Anderson out. And again, with the White Sox middle infield situation, it is time to start figuring it out because Tim Anderson's got 2 years left on his contract. Yohan Makata has 2 guarantee years left on his contract before the club options hit. Not only do you have Lenyn Sosa, but you got Jose Rodriguez, as I mentioned, so keep an eye on him in Birmingham. It's unfortunate that Colson Montgomery is going to miss all of April with an injury, and it'll be interesting to see where the White Sox have him start when he rejoins the team in May. If he is either going to be in Birmingham or in Winston-Salem, I think it'd be beneficial for the White Sox to not just play Colson Montgomery at shortstop, but also at third base so he gets some time there to give the front office some flexibility in how they want to handle this situation. But sooner than later, maybe the White Sox do have an infield configuration where it's Sosa and Rodriguez up the middle, either at second or at shortstop, and Colson Montgomery over at third base, or maybe Colson Montgomery is the shortstop while Brian Ramos continues to rake, and maybe Ramos can prove that he can stick defensively at third base. The White Sox, I think, are doing a good job in developing infielders. That is a feather in the cap for the player development side. They're struggling to develop starting pitching. They're struggling to develop outfielders. They got to figure that out. But right now, it does seem like the White Sox have some options in the infield. So it's not all doom and gloom, as a lot of people have been pointing out in the comments, with Tim Anderson being out 2 to 4 weeks. It sucks that Tim Anderson's out 2 to 4 weeks because it does seem like when Tim Anderson goes, so do the White Sox. And Anderson's having a good start to the 2023 season. And you got to move Andrews over to second base to shortstop. If Lenyn Sosa was hitting 225 in Charlotte and was getting called up, I think the vibes would be different. These are unknown vibes. It's not like full of dread vibes. The full of dread vibes is here we go again. The dominoes are starting to fall. Guys are starting to get hurt. We just started the season. But here, at least with Lenyn Sosa, you have someone interesting. With Eloy Jimenez being out, you're giving Jake Berger and Gavin Sheets another opportunity to see if they could be Major League DH. And again, Berger's providing power. Sheets is doing a good job of getting on base. So they're holding their own, filling a DH. And let's see what Sosa can do. But I'm hoping this is just a blip in the injury radar, that all of a sudden you got 3 guys that hop it on. This is not a trend. We don't need to see Yohan Makata go on the injured list. You don't need to see Luis Robert go on the injured list. So hopefully the White Sox stay a lot more healthy. Matthew, what about Brian Ramos at third? Yep, Ramos definitely could be an option at third base. He needs to clean up defensively. That's the biggest concern when you speak to scouts and analysts, is that they're not really sure if he's a major league third baseman. He may need a position change, but he made some impressive plays in spring training. So let's see. Again, he's still developing. He's just 20 years old. He turns 21 this season, so he's still pretty young. So let's see on how he develops defensively. But we know that he can hit, and we know the computer models really, really like Brian Ramos, and they are projecting him to be a productive major leaguer. Zips has him in the top 25 prospects in all of Major League Baseball. TJ's bringing up a point about the White Sox bench with Makata out for the Twins series. The bench is 2 first basemen, Sheets and Berger, and either Romy Gonzalez or Hanser Alberto in the utility role. Yep. That is the White Sox bench. A couple more here before I got to head out and actually eat lunch. Billy, if Berger starts raking and even starts hitting righties, does Eloy become a trade candidate? Yep. I just don't think that there's a lot of value right now for Eloy. The problem with Eloy in general, if he's a guy that can only play 100 games and you don't want him playing in the outfield, there's just not a lot of value, folks, in Major League Baseball for a DH who plays 100 games because he hurts himself running. What? No team's going to give you anything because they've got guys already that do that. Eloy needs a lot more pressure. Like the Bunsen burner of pressure needs to be turned up to full heat when he comes back. He needs to start playing up to his potential. The grace period is over for Eloy Jimenez. And then finally, we'll end it here with Jerry's question: can the White Sox get to and maintain a 500 record while Anderson is out? Great question, Jerry. This is the goal. I think if the White Sox are 500 after April, they're in a great position. The schedule gets easier the month of May and June. April, in my opinion, is the second most difficult month on paper for the Chicago White Sox. The most difficult month is the month of July, where the homestand that they have before the All-Star break is against Toronto and St. Louis. At least those games are at home. You have the All-Star break, and then you have Atlanta on the road, Queens, the Mets on the road, and then the Minnesota Twins on the road. And then you come back home. You got 2 home games against the Cubs, and the Cubs have been playing pretty good baseball to start the year. And then you have a weekend series against the Cleveland Guardians, and then it's the trade deadline. That is, in my opinion, the most difficult stretch of the 2023 season for the White Sox, and will say so much about where they go in the second half of the season. But in order to put themselves in a position where they avoid selling, they cannot dig themselves a grave in the month of April. That's why it's so important here for the White Sox to have their role players, the other starters, and guys like Renin Sosa to come up and start producing immediately so they could fill in the void that Tim Anderson leaves. Because it's not going to be a very easy month of April for the Chicago White Sox. I really appreciate everybody hopping on. This is our first time using the emergency setup here instead of using Twitter Space. I enjoy interacting with everyone in the comment section on YouTube. You can, again, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't already on youtube.com/SoxMachine. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at SoxMachine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. And if you enjoy our work, you can sign up to become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Later tonight, we will have another watch party, which you can join us on playback.tv/SoxMachine along with our friends from the 108. We will be watching the White Sox Twins game together, providing our live commentary, and there will be a lot more discussion about the impact of Tim Anderson's injury. We'll talk about Yoan Moncada's status, and we'll see in how Pedro Grifol sets the lineup up and see on who is producing immediately, as it's still a pretty big series for the White Sox. If they can pick up another win in Minneapolis, I think that would be great. You have 6 fewer games against your division opponents this season, and winning a road series in Minneapolis, I think, can go a long way in helping the White Sox. So the White Sox are in weather the storm mode right now for the rest of April. We'll see if they can do it. But really appreciate everybody hopping on. Thank you so much for the interaction in the comment section, and we'll see you soon.